The Rockpile Report.
Buffalo, New York is going to be the epicenter of every stargazing nerd's wet dream.
With Buffalo Bills season ticket holder, Drew Geter.
If there was ever a time to break out Skyline Chili, it's when the Bills are 5-2, right?
The Rockpile Report. The pettiest, hardest drinking Bills podcast.
Everybody. You notice the lack of exuberance there, Chris? Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Rockpile Report podcast. I think I'm meeting the energy of the week. It's Super Bowl week, and we're sitting here talking about end-of-season press conferences rather than a Super Bowl appearance from the Buffalo Bills. We're all salty about it. You don't have to get mad at me. Don't shoot the messenger. It's going to happen. Chris, what is your thing? I think it's interesting to think about. You know, you had made a comment during our live show last week that podcast downloads across the Bills sphere were going to be down this week.
Yeah, they have to be.
And it's because of how people cope with these things. Like when the Buffalo Bills get eliminated from a game like that, the way that they do, we obviously have to prep and do a show. But I don't fault anybody else if they just legitimately, I go into a hole. Outside of my own process, I don't watch ESPN. I can't listen to WGR. I avoid sports content on social media or on websites that I frequent. I'm not reading The Athletic because I don't want to see it. I can't. I will focus on my own thing and my own process, and I will get through this. And so I'm sure there's a lot of people. I think it's fair to say most people probably just go into a hole for a week or two, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can look at the numbers of our podcast based on people that listen during the season, and then people that listen now that the season's over. We're going to, again, I haven't seen any mocks tweeted at us yet, but we're going to get into the combine stuff, free agency stuff, draft stuff, and there's just people that choose not to listen to that. You got the people, I only listen during the season. I don't care what happens in the off season.
And it's worse when it hurts the way these always seem to, right?
Yeah.
When you get eliminated. And so I don't blame a lot of people. And I also don't blame a lot of people who don't care about my coach and GM are going to go up on a podium and talk about how we sucked. And if you want to be WGR Weiner Line caller guy about it, you're entitled to that. You know, I think one of my favorite quotes of all time comes from the movie Ghostbuster 2. Mayor Lenny, I believe his last name is Lenny Klotch, was the mayor of New York City in the Ghostbusters movies. And in Ghostbusters 2, he has one of my favorite quotes, which is, "Being miserable and treating other people like dirt is every New Yorker's God-given right." And I love it. I love how succinct and straight to the point and very firm in that belief that he is. And if it's I think people can suffer and be however they want to be. If you have that feeling inside of you, you let it out, because then at least we all know where we stand. And so in that way, if that's how you feel and you decide, you know what, I can't listen to I'm mad at these guys because I think they did a poor job, or I'm just too hurt by the loss and I don't care what kind of excuses they're going to give or whatever the case may be, you probably blew off the end of season pressers. Or if you're just the person who was, again, so hurt by the loss that you say, I have to detach from Bills content completely. Well, it's okay. Because I myself went into just the sports hole. And then Sunday I was able to dust it off. And I decided that it would be good to go back and listen to these. I'm actually really happy that I did. You know, tonight we're going to bring you, if you're listening on audio only, we're going to bring you on for the YouTube viewers, a combination of audio and video, just kind of underscoring some of the best points to come out of these press conferences. And I really think that there was a lot there, Chris. This was my first time actually sitting down and listening to the end of season pressers all the way through for myself. I probably have historically done what most people do, right? They wait for some talking head or some shitty journalist to go and do the hard work for me, bring me the sound bites. The problem is if you only listen to the sound bites and what like your journalist of choice wants to bring you, you end up in a place where you get that person's opinion on what was said ham-fisted into it. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of that, but it's more so just my observations and thoughts on what was said. I have no agenda here. And I don't think Brandon Beane really needs a whole lot of defending. I mean, does he?
I mean, so whenever you get a new coach and GM, you might give it a year, maybe two. All right, let me dive into their press conferences, see how they are. It's been noted on this show that McDermott is fucking ambient with his press conferences. So in past, it's been, we don't really need to listen to because you're just going to give us the runaround, your same coach speak press conference bullshit.
And that's where I thought that this was a great exercise because I was really surprised by what, like, okay, McDermott still gave a lot of what you'd expect from him, right? But I also believe he was refreshingly candid about a bunch of things like Kyer Elam, right? His view of his own performance, talked about his own explanation and kind of journey through becoming a better coach and how he really did. It's not just lip service that he gave to Ty Dunn for an article, but it was his changed belief in what his job as a head coach was. His job is to be a facilitator, not the guy in charge. And by doing that, he thinks he's a better coach. And I think, Chris, the results on the field with two rookie coordinators speak for themselves, right?
Yeah, and he let him play out. He didn't, try to micromanage, which is probably what you do at your own job.
Oh, my God. Guys, I'm a couple steps removed from being Mr. Tarkanian from that Saturday Night Live sketch where Pierce Brosnan is interviewing for a job. I'm this far away from being that guy. Give me a car antenna. I'll chase people around the office. I'm kidding. But it is funny that this was a clear transformative season for Sean McDermott. And I'm not saying you have to love the guy, but I think that a lot of the discourse, and people called me an apologist last week. They were like, oh, you were the guy who hated McDermott, and then you were there kissing his ass. No. What I'm here to point out is we've been pounding the table asking for a different Sean McDermott for years. Stop being this stodgy guy who's stuck in his ways and won't be flexible and won't give anybody the room to do their jobs the way they're supposed to do it. Your quarterback, your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator. And then he does it, and it's like the community who's still mad at him, and I get it, right? Like the fact that he couldn't be prepared enough to get over the hump. That's it. It's a valid criticism. But the concept is he did it different, and you all went, well, not like that, you idiot. We want it different, just not different that way. I have no patience for that. You got some of what you asked for. Nobody gets everything they ask for because we're not 5 and this isn't our birthday. He's trying. And I think that he had an admission at a certain point of this, right? Like this was the first point. If I want to talk about a takeaway where if you actually listened to the thing instead of just reading the clips or getting a soundbite that was 3 seconds long, Sean's admission that the coaches know and made sure before that Kansas City Chiefs game that the players understood and could plan for the eventuality that they were going to have bogus calls going against them and that things were not going to get called for them. It was a polarizing part of the press conference among the fan base this week. If you only got the 3 seconds where he was like, oh, well, I coached them that they weren't going to get calls. Yeah, that's weak. That's soft. Again, the WGR Weinerline callers coming out of the woodwork to bitch about this stuff. But he did go back and underscore throughout the entire conversation, if you listened to it in its entirety, that that's not the reason they lost. He's like, we did not lose we lost because of the play on the field, not because of a few bad calls that didn't go our way. And so the people out here saying that he's got a loser mentality or that it's weak-minded to carry that sort of ideology into a football game, tell me you've never played a sport without saying it out loud. Show me your outrage about a coach just being honest with his players about a set of circumstances and then like, I just know, that guy's never actually played anything competitive. Chris, when you go up against a team in hockey that you know has you outgunned, the conversation among you and your friends is probably like, all right, they're going to get theirs because they've got a top line and they're two wingers. We can't defend them. So here's what we do.
You just try to keep it close.
Keep it close.
Do what you can do.
But that's a conversation you and your friends are having.
Yeah.
Does that make you weak-minded? No, it makes you you're like, look, this is a reality. Makes you human. This is a reality that I have to fucking deal with, right? Like, it feels proactive. I've been on both sides of this conversation, right? Both good and bad. I've been on the side of it where, I've been basically told by a middle school, football game. The East Aurora Cowboys were playing the North Collins Eden Bears. This is children's football, mind you. And our coach comes into practice and goes, no, they're gonna, you guys on the inside of the offensive line, they're gonna eat you up. They're just too good. They're too big. They're too strong, and you guys just can't. You better pack I remember him looking at me and going, you all better pack a lunch. It's gonna be a long day out there. And I go, well, fucking thanks, coach. And then he goes, but don't worry, I'm gonna teach you some things. And you know what he taught us, Chris?
Cheap shots.
His idea on how to deal with this was, hey, you always check to see where the back judge is. And he goes, and then you take the guy and you grab the jersey and you kind of drive and you make it look like you're trying to block. And here's how, depending on where that ref is and where this ref is, you decide which hand to slide up underneath that kid's chin strap and give him the what for. Yeah. So here we are thinking like, oh yeah, no, this is a good thing. And then you have a kid in the middle of the game who just leaves. He walks off the field and refuses to play. He's crying. This kid is in tears because he's getting assaulted and no one's seeing it and no one's calling it and he's frustrated. And you have to do that thing where you stop and you're like, uh-oh, I'm the bad guy now. Now I'm the piece of shit here. On the other side of this, Coach Puntillo, North Collins High School basketball against the Hinsdale basketball team. There was a year, I think I was in 8th grade. Their whole team was taller than us by 3 to 5 inches. And I just remember coach pulling us together on the bus going, all right, guys, look, here's what's going to happen. Anytime you're down working the low post, you are not going to get a call. They are going to thump you down there. You might even catch an elbow. They might shove you. You're not going to get the calls because they're so much bigger than you. The refs are just going to assume it's because they're being more physical. And don't get frustrated. Don't let it get in your head. Just keep playing your game. If you get pushed off your spot, fine. Don't give it to them, but don't retaliate if you get fouled because we don't have many bigs to begin with. So let's be pragmatic about how we play in the post. Which way is the more, effective way to coach a team in your mind, Chris?
You probably tackle it like Will Ferrell in Kicking and Screaming. Cheat, but don't get caught.
So you're like Coach Bunn. Great. No, I genuinely think that it's pragmatic to look at it and say, look, this is the reality. You're going to have to find a way to deal with it, but let it go. Have a short memory. Keep it moving because it won't serve you to hang on to that. The frustration is just like pissing your pants. Everyone's going to see you're mad. You're the only one who feels it and you're the only one who's going to be harmed by it. So stop it. In its entirety, though, Beane was probably the more interesting interview. It's really easy to see why agents love Brandon Beane. He doesn't bloviate. He doesn't grandstand. He also doesn't make hyperbolic statements. He just talks. It's like you and me sitting down here having beers.
Yeah, but when he does talk, it's few and far between.
Sure.
We get preseason, end of season, maybe once during camp, and that's about all we get from Brandon Beane.
Yeah, and you never hear him ask or treat. He never treats a question like it's stupid, right? I've never heard him bristle at a question before.
And that's why you can't be a GM.
No, the first guy, I would have people thrown out of the room and I want it on camera. I'd be like, like a comedian on stage, I would kick guys out and then I would ask the camera to pan to it so they can watch, Jay Skursky getting dragged out by his stupid collar with his dumb hair flying in the wind as he gets dragged out the back door. And I'd be like, you see that? Next question. So, like one of the things was someone brought up, hey, Brandon, you've always said that your final game shows a window into what your team needs next year. Like how your last game ended shows you what you need to work on for next year. His response was perfect. He goes, if you told me that I had the ball with down 3 with less than 4 minutes with Josh having the ball in his hand, he goes, put me back in that spot again next year. I'd take that. I would take it every single time. Do you agree?
Yeah.
I do. Like, no GM could watch that performance, though, and not just think, like, man, if they just had a little more talent, right? He got asked about Amari Cooper, and I really liked the way he handled it, but that was also interesting. You know, a doctor, he admitted, again, this is the transparency of our GM, that if you don't watch these things, you're not picking up. He admitted that one of the doctors who looked at Amari Cooper just flat out said he needs surgery. But they left it up to the player. And Cooper decided he wanted to play. And so they allowed him to try to play through it. And you saw lack of effectiveness. You know, everyone's like, oh, where's Amari? He's not being used. Amari's hurt. Like hurt. And yet he's out here on the field. And Beane mentioned that he's like, I think I saw it somewhere. It's got to be someone in his analytics department, but he does a good job of just being like a dude at the bar. He's like, I don't know. I saw a number somewhere that Amari Cooper being on the field for the Bills, we scored 7 more points a game. Like, I don't know. We kind of needed him out there even if it was just to draw attention.
I'd love it if the Sabres took that approach. Oh, there's an injury. Let's let the player decide what they would like to have done and how it's done and who does it.
But what I found interesting about that is because this is a franchise, Chris, that I think has been applauded over the years that for protecting players from themselves, right? Being cautious when it comes to injuries. We saw it this year. Brandon Codrington had a hamstring pull right before the playoffs. And it was up in the air whether he'd play in the Denver game. And then the week after we beat Denver, Codrington comes out and says to the media, oh, no, I was fine, but they wanted me to give it another week of rest. And then the following week against the Ravens, they still wouldn't play Codrington. And then in the AFC title game, where was Codrington?
Out.
Inactive. This is a team that was like, look, we still think your situation's significant enough that we don't want to risk it. Just sit here and maybe we have you for the Super Bowl if we make it. So the fact that they deferred to Amari instead of letting him get that surgery after he injured his wrist, like, I think it underscores deep down they knew that they needed him. And for the first time in a while, they were willing to let that need change the ethos of who they are and how they approach player injuries. And sure enough, he was needed. He was instrumental in the first half in that Kansas City game that we went on to win. Without Amari Cooper, who knows if we win that game? I don't hold it against Beane. They made the trade once they knew what this season could be, after a year that we all thought was supposed to be just a rebuilding year. But the fact that they allowed him to keep playing through that injury underscores that they do get it. For all the people who go, they don't understand the urgency and they're like, they need to be. No, the urgency is they let a guy who was not healthy enough to be playing and probably needed surgery suit up every single week because it was better for the team. If that goes against everything that they've shown you that they believe in. If that's not urgency, Chris, I don't know what is. Now, speaking of injuries, there was a real interesting part of this thing that made me like, I did that thing. It was like that meme where, you know, from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where the guy, Leonardo DiCaprio with a beer, and then he sits up and he points. He's like, oh, play the audio of Sean McDermott being asked about James Cook.
On that last drive, offensively, James wasn't out there. Was he dealing with an injury late in that game?
No, not that I'm aware of, at least.
So I guess, sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
So I guess just to follow up on that then, looking back, hindsight, so it was 2020, he had such a huge game. Would you want him out there in some of those moments?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I don't want to take anything away from Ty Johnson, however. And when you look at it just the way, let me just back up on James first to give him his credit. What a game he played. What a year he had. And that's a great example of these players. We really drafted James to be a pass-catching running back, right? And he comes in and blossoms and just develops in more ways than one, on the field, off the field. He's in our leadership council meetings in the morning. And then just if you could have stood next to me and heard him in that game, the way what he was saying to me and how he was talking to me, it was even with the year he had, it was like he was on missile lock.
There you go. Sean McDermott on James Cook and his season-ending press conference over at BuffaloBills.com.
Raise your hand if you initially bought the narrative that James Cook wasn't in the game at the end of that Kansas City loss because he was hurt, and you just accepted that.
Yeah, I'll raise my hand too.
Now keep your hand in the air if you're cool with it now in retrospect, knowing the full story. And that the player was available, that it was an active choice to keep your most electric running back on the sideline in a moment where you might have needed him.
Yeah, with 3:33 left in the game and timeouts in hand, you got to run the ball in that sitch.
This is where, if you want to get mad about Sean McDermott, you want to get mad at him for something, here you go. Let's talk about this. It starts with the response, I don't want to take anything away from Ty Johnson. I will take everything away from Ty Johnson if it comes at the expense of James Cook. It did, and then I think he thought like he had to. It's almost like he said it. He started to say something and then was like, well, let me back up. Like, this is something I've been criticized for at times as a manager of people, where they're like, you can't just deliver bad news. You kind of should kind of try to even out bad news with good news, or negativity with a little bit of positivity, maybe include a little schmeckle of something that makes people feel good before you drop something that's going to make them feel bad. So he decides, like, I started to say, I don't want to take away from James Cook. Well, let me go back. Let me talk about James Cook and tell you how great I think he is and what a great kid. But that just makes it worse, because what you're telling me is there is a guy, right, who's part of your leadership council, and he's grown into a better back than you ever could have expected. He's one of the league's premier talents at the position. And your staff intentionally kept that talent on the sideline in a must-have moment because Ty Johnson's the guy who gets the 2-minute drive. Oh, Chris, I had to pause it. Sunday night, right? Sunday night, I was sick all weekend. I had a fever. I thought I had strep throat, but I tested negative for it. So it was just a bad sore throat. Lymph nodes all swollen. I had a fever, chills, muscle aches, all this stuff all weekend long. Got to the point, Chris, where I fell asleep like every night by like 9 o'clock. I had one beer. Every night I would try to fight the good fight and be like, tonight's the night I'm going to have 5 beers. And I would have one and fall asleep immediately. And so that night, Sunday night, I finally felt good. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a couple of these guys. I'm going to pour myself a couple short guys, and I'm going to do some podcast stuff. And when I heard that answer towards the end of his press conference, I had to get up off the couch and walk. Just pace the house for a minute. Larissa's like, what are you doing? I said, don't talk to me. You can't talk to me right now because I might yell. The Bills are not on TV, but I might yell. Is that, or is that not a frustrating decision and kind of underscores the things that people still don't trust about Sean McDermott?
Yeah, there's a tweet that Kyle had a couple days after Kyle Trimble banged up Bills had a couple days after the game where apparently James Cook had left the game, maybe 11 minutes left in the game, and was checked by trainers and then never went back in the game. So it wasn't just the final drive thing. He got injured, allegedly, I'm air quote, allegedly injured early in the fourth quarter, and that's why he wasn't in for the final drive.
What are the odds that a head coach doesn't know that his starting running back is hurt? Like, oh, he got hurt and the trainers ruled him, said, hey, you can't go out there. And Sean McDermott just didn't know about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't believe that at all.
You don't think that's not the first conversation that happens after the trainers look at a player? Hey, coach, so-and-so's, it's iffy. Who do you want? Like, that's how it goes. So was he hurt? Was he? But I guess it doesn't matter. But to have your coach go, oh, no, he wasn't hurt to my knowledge. To my knowledge. Are we going to have to Bill Clinton this thing? Like, what is the definition of to your knowledge?
Yeah.
What is it?
What's the definition of is?
Yeah, what is the definition of knowledge? Is it a thing I was told, or is it a thing that I know? It's like, holy shit. Sean, this is why people get mad at you. This is why people want to scream in your face. Oh, God. Anyways, Brandon Beane. Brandon Beane took and answered a lot of really interesting questions. And I think for all of you out there, you do well to go watch his whole presser because I find him refreshing. And I feel like because, Chris, to your point, we don't hear from him often. So when he does speak in a public forum like that, long form, I learn a lot. I learn a lot about him. I learn a lot about his views on things. I learn he's kind of funny. Like he has a little bit of a sense of humor.
Yeah, he also proves you wrong when he says, oh, we think we've got linebackers in-house.
Yeah.
Turns out we do.
He goes, hey, we don't need to bring in right tackle help. Spencer Brown's going to be fine. It's like, all right, maybe I'm the idiot here then. So there was a question asked about whether it needed to be top of mind for Brandon Beane all offseason long as he prepares the next iteration of what this team looks like, to keep in mind what the Kansas City Chiefs are doing, you know, how they're constructed, how we lost to them, and just like, is this the game that you need? Like, is this the team that you need to constantly be preparing for in the offseason? And is that how you decide how to shape the roster?
For me, it always starts in your division because that's your ticket to the postseason. If you don't take care of business in your division, then you don't get the opportunity maybe to play the Chiefs.
There you go, Brandon Beane, post-season press conference, BuffaloBills.com.
The Kansas City Chiefs have indeed built a dynasty, just like the New England Patriots before them. Do you know what really helps pave the way to what some assholes now call the Arrowhead Invitational every year? The fact that the AFC West is almost somehow worse than the drought-era AFC East. It's bad, Chris. I dug into the numbers. Look at this. From 2017, the year that Mahomes was drafted, to 2023, they have 4 combined double-digit win seasons among all 3 other AFC West franchises. Think about all of the games and all of the seasons, and you mean to tell me that those 3 franchises have put together 4 individual double-digit win seasons?
That's insane.
The division has had 13 different head coaches, 12 different quarterbacks, only 2 of whom will ever be talked about as a part of a gold jacket party over there in Canton. That thing is a fucking mess. Like, we make fun of the AFC South. The only reason the AFC South gets the flack that it does is because it doesn't have the Chiefs in it. If Patrick Mahomes had been drafted by the Titans, we would be having the same conversation.
I would also throw into the AFC South. You also don't have fan bases.
No.
Because it's Indianapolis, Houston, Jacksonville, and Tennessee. Tennessee used to be in Houston. Houston's a new team. Jacksonville, we know they don't have a fan base because they keep playing overseas. There's no fan base in the AFC South.
Look at the AFC West. You've got the Chargers that used to be in San Diego that are now in LA. You've got the Raiders that used to be in LA that are now living in Las Vegas. And you've got the Cardinals, who
No, it's not the Cardinals, the Broncos.
Oh, Jesus Christ, the Broncos, who people care about, but do they?
See, the thing is with the Raiders are a brand. My uncle has my uncle, who lives in Orlando, has never lived in LA, is a fan of the Raiders because he's been
I met him at your wedding.
Yeah, since he was a kid, he has gone hunting in the Fredonia area, and through hunting in Fredonia, he had met Daryl LaMonica, who was a Bill, and then got traded to the Raiders or signed with the Raiders, and that's how he became a Raiders fan. So that's his only connection to the Raiders. He lives in Orlando. He has season tickets to the Raiders. The Raiders are a brand, and then San Diego has no fan base. I will tell you this. I will tell you this. I had a guy I used to work with. His nickname was Wahoo. He and I were watching. This was like, I don't know what we were at Taco Mac in Alpharetta, and for whatever reason, this was like April or May, and somebody walked into the bar wearing an Eli jersey. Now, we all know Eli said, "I'm not playing for the Chargers," and got traded to the Giants. Wahoo goes, "I'm going to go punch that guy." Just because he's wearing an Eli Giants jersey, and Wahoo's a huge Chargers fan. And I was like, if you go over there and punch that guy, I'm leaving. He went over there and hit the guy, and I got my bill and left, and then he got kicked out and banned from Taco Mac.
Of course.
I mean, Chargers fans are
few and far between.
They can be nuts.
But the ones who are there are...
Wear your Kevlar vest.
You remember when we used to play that every time it was like, welcome to L.A.?
Yes.
This is all to say that the Chiefs are capitalizing on the just utter disarray around them. Mahomes personally has a 35-5 record against the rest of the AFC West. 35-5.
It's like Brady against the AFC East.
That's my point. That's my entire point. The Bills have to handle their own business the same way if we're going to continue to get shots at them in the postseason. And I don't know, I for one am happy that that's where my GM's head is at. Control what you can control. I can't keep chasing that team, trying to always figure out, well, what were they last year? Well, let me figure out how to beat that, because you're always going to be a step behind. Your focus should be win my division every fucking year. And then when I know I'm going to see them, or maybe not. Chris, maybe you remember the year where Tony Pollard decided that the world didn't need Tom Brady and just took the lowest cheap shot elbow to the knee I've ever seen in like week 1 and just took Tom Brady out of the equation. And it was the lone year that the Patriots didn't make the playoffs during that run.
They also did have 11 wins and missed the playoffs. That was like the first time in a long time that an 11-win team didn't make the playoffs.
But so it underscores control what I can control. If Patrick Mahomes goes down week 2 and his season's over, it doesn't change anything. I still got to win my division. If I win my division, I get to the playoffs and I figure things out when I get there.
So you win the division, you get the home game. That's what you want.
I mean, when you look at the disarray that's going on in our own division, tell me we're not that different. The Patriots, like they're on their second head coach in 2 years.
The Patriots could be the team. What do they have? 2 wins? 3 wins? They could jump to 7-10 next year with Vrabel.
I look how you said jump. I thought you were going
to. But for them, that's a huge jump. They're not going to get Dolphins. None of those teams in our division are even on our level.
Do you know who the head coaches were of the Dolphins when
Tony Sparano?
Tony Sparano.
That's all. That's
all you know.
He won the division. Tony Sparano is the guy that won the division when Brady got hurt and Matt Castle came in, and the Patriots ended up going 11-5 and missing.
And it was
the
mostly
playoffs.
And it was mostly Ronnie Brown and the Wildcat. And then every team decided like we had Brad, whatever the hell his name was, and
Brad Smith.
So in any event, look at this. So since McDermott got hired, there's been head coach Gase, then Flores, now McDaniel. So 3 head coaches. In terms of quarterbacks, Cutler, Tannehill, Fitzpatrick, Tagovailoa. But within that, there's like 5 other quarterbacks.
Yeah, because of his injuries.
So you've got that mess. For the Jets have had Bowles, Gase. How funny is it that Sean McDermott has wins over Adam Gase for 2 different franchises?
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Bowles, Gase, Saleh, Ulbrich, now this new guy. So they've got 5 head coaches. They've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different passers. We have the same thing. Like, we've done good for the last 5 years of just winning our division and taking care of this business. Never mind what Kansas City's doing. And I know that that's where every fan's head is at, of like, oh, well, we got to catch that team. And it's recency bias, like it always is. The reality is you beat the teams that get you a ticket to the dance, right?
Yeah.
Let the rest figure itself out. No one else in the AFC North or AFC South can say, every year I win my division because everyone else here sucks. And even when they don't suck, I can put my boot in their ass. It's us and the Chiefs. That's why we see each other all the time. I like that Beane's thing is I want more. I want to keep that thing going. And I'll figure the Chiefs out eventually. It's that eventually thing that brings us to the next one, because they were asked, so someone asked him a question about the state of things, always falling short, not being on the right side of a handful of plays. And, the result of not being on the right side of a handful of plays is us going home again. Brandon Beane started to talk about the state of the roster and then ended up talking about where we are now versus, where we've been historically. I mean, Chris, play it.
This is not a team that's got a bunch of 33-year-olds to 34-year-olds that you just need to reset. Maybe some areas, or maybe a position, or maybe a player here or there. But this team did a lot of really good things this season. And when you look holistically at what we've done year after year after year, I think a lot of people would sign up for that. Is it what we want, the final result? No. But I've heard it told to me by multiple people that have been in this league longer than I have, keep kicking the door, and you're going to knock it down.
It's Brandon Beane, post-season press conference. Go watch the whole thing, BuffaloBills.com.
This, I think, is a point that escapes a lot of us who like me. As the great John Fino once told me, I'm a prisoner of the moment. We hyperbolize what every single season means. We feel so deeply within ourselves that this has to be the year. This has to be the year. And because I think it's because we're carrying around, Chris, the weight of all of those previous chances to win a Super Bowl.
Yes.
It's become like an anchor that we carry around. It's baggage. We're the multiple-time divorcee trying to start a new relationship every year. We have baggage. You know all about that.
Sure.
Bazinga! So part of my drunken, shirtless rumination that went on the night after we lost, right? Have we played the Cops video for anybody?
No.
Guys, go to our Twitter at Rockpile Report. I found a clip that perfectly encapsulates what it sounds like when you're as drunk as I was and you use the word ruminate. You're the guy talking to the police about how high your IQ is while you're shirtless eating a bologna sandwich. That's what you are. And I have a clip that encapsulates it. Go check it out at our Twitter handle at Rockpile Report.
You have to slip ruminate in on every show from now on.
I'm such an...
Somebody, I think, somebody comment. I sent you that thing. Somebody from Instagram, one of her reels comment. You got to use ruminate from now on.
But part of me was wondering, would I rather be a Lions fan in the sense that my team's never been to a Super Bowl in my lifetime or my dad's lifetime? Would being a fan of a team that's never even seen the show take some of this weight that I feel ahead of each one of these games and just reduce the emotional toll that the losses take? If only just because I was genuinely excited to be there. If I was genuinely excited to be a part of that football game. The Broncos aren't what we think of when we think about down bad franchises, as the kids say. But they just broke nearly a double-digit year playoff drought this season. And how'd that playoff game go? They got massacred.
Yeah, it's it reminded me of, remember when Miami made the playoffs and they played Pittsburgh, and then I think was it Matt Moore that was their quarterback, and they just got obliterated in the playoffs, and that's all they've ever experienced is wild card losses.
So I'm looking for the text because we got it. I got a text from our guy, basically just saying,
Alf?
No. Our Broncos guy there.
Oh yeah, David.
Essentially, just pointing out. He goes, it's about time you. So he was texting me throughout the course of the next week. He was just like, hey, as soon as it was over, he goes, thanks for having me on. Ton of fun. Rooting for you guys the rest of the way. And I asked him, I was like, you guys aren't salty that you lost. He was like, no, this was great. Also, it's about time you guys had some luck bounce your way. And then after, I told him, I go, Vance Joseph looked like he was caught between wanting to throw up and just wanting to die on national TV. And then we talked about, like, he and I went back and forth over text, and he was just like, look, I'm not mad about the fact that we got curb stomped by the Buffalo Bills. You want to know why? Because we're moving in the right direction. We got closer incrementally to the place we want to be. Proof positive that this thing can work. And I feel like the Bills did that. And so for him to have that attitude, like, he would have killed for a shot at the championship game, but he was just happy to be in the playoffs. The Houston Texans, Chris, are only 22 years old. They're a baby in terms of what the NFL is. They've only had 6 double-digit win seasons over that 22 years. They didn't even qualify for the playoffs in a few of those. And they've never, as a franchise, played in an AFC title game. Do you think for a second that their fan base, that Brett Coleman, wouldn't have done backflips if they had found a way to make the AFC title game?
Oh, yeah.
And then lost. And then they went to Kansas City and lost, and everyone would have been like, it's fine, because this is rarefied air. Only 4 teams get to be here. What if I was a fan of one of those teams that didn't have our recent run of success, or a top 2 to 3 quarterback in the league, and a staff that, even if you don't love him, is good enough to get you into the wild card round every single season? Would that make me more appreciative of amazing regular seasons? Just because I didn't have any expectation tied to them? Like, if I just rooted for some bum team that sucked, I've already done that. I spent years of my life doing that. And it made me question, how did we get to a place? How did we get to this place where all of a sudden the loss in the championship game is reason to just, like, fold it up? This sucks. I don't want to hear about it. Chris, how did we become so entitled?
I don't know, but I just know I have it in my DNA that I know, we'll be back. Might not be next year because we have the AFC has some of the best quarterbacks, but I know in the next 5 years I might see another AFC title game. I might even see a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl win in the next 5 years. I'm comfortable where we're at as a franchise as long as we have 17.
That's it. And that's where, the next question is perfect. Other than I do have to have a sidebar. Who the fuck is telling Brandon Beane that if you just keep kicking the door, you'll make it? Do you know how many people have died at the helm of, eventually? There needs to be a little urgency, but not, I get it. People are like, we have to do this tomorrow or else the sky's going to fall. No, but there needs to be a little urgency. There needs to be a little bit. You can't just treat every year like, hey, we're gifted this thing. What happens if they go into next? Well, and this is the thing. It's what we said heading into this year. It's like, oh, if the Bills suck, catastrophic injury to Josh, something happens, it's fine. We're going to draft in the top 5. And that'll be okay. Because then we'll finally get our Jamar Chase. We'll go get that pass rusher that we don't want to pay for in free agency. And we can't trade up for, and we can't do all these things. It's like, look, guys, we're here. Like, tomorrow's not promised. And whoever's telling Brandon Beane, like, hey, just keep doing what you're doing. No. Do a little more, Brandon. Not a ton. Don't get wild. do a little more. Now, that's underscored by the fact that Sal Capaccio asked Brandon, are we in a better cap situation now? And how does it feel being in this now, looking at this season's cap versus when they were having the end of season press conference last year? And this is what, Beane had to talk about the idea of, well, Chris, maybe it makes sense just to hit him with the audio.
We won't be in as deep of a cap hole. Now, we also had some numbers that were easier to move off of last year. You didn't necessarily want to lose the player, but you could instantly, removing this player, and this player, get $23 million back just like that, or 25. I don't know the number. I don't think we have as many of those options, but we're okay. We also have to remember, we've got guys that are coming up on extensions and things like that. So I don't expect us to be, as I said here a year ago, big spenders in free agency or anything like that. We still have to manage this cap because we're not going to, again, try and set this thing up to go into a year where we got to strip it all down while we got number 17. We want to give him every chance every single year to see if that team in 25, 26, 27, and as many years as he can play can contend for a title.
Brandon Beane, postseason press conference, BuffaloBills.com.
Now, Chris, that's a pragmatic position.
Yes.
And it makes sense to me, even as a rabid fan who wants to see them burn the boats and get a Lombardi coming down Delaware Avenue. You never want to tear down in a window where in his prime Josh is your quarterback, because that's wasting a year of the magic that he's capable of making. I mean, we all saw what he did this year. Mac Hollins led the team in touchdown catches and caught a touchdown in the AFC title game. Mac Hollins, who everyone at the beginning of the year was like, he's a bit player. Justin Shorter should be competing with him for a job. What?
I think he falls in line with like those free agent signings we have, like the Trent Sherfield types, where you just want to get another body in for a year, and it turns like everything that Mac Hollins had done this year, whether it was his route running, some of his catches, his touchdowns, and definitely his ability to block as a wide receiver, made a hell of a difference for this wide receiving core.
I also like his point about like budding, like you have to avoid budding off more than you can chew from a cap perspective. Yep. Look at this. A perfect example of taking on deals that you need to be able, like if you need to, you can slide out of them. The Von Miller deal. We took a swing at a big name pass rusher who, when he was healthy that season, Chris, he was great. The Bills' defense was great. He tears his ACL on a shitty Detroit field. Can't help it. Can't help who you play. Right now, Von Miller, if we were to cut him, would open cap space. If you designate him as a post-June 1 cut, it opens even more cap space. He was just signed 3 years ago.
Yeah. I thought his deal was, it's 6-year deal, but in reality, it's 3 years, and then we'll see for 4, 5, and 6.
And so this is why it matters how good Brandon Beane is at what he does. Because the fact that we now have the ability to say, look, we've taken our medicine, we want more cap space, you're not living up to your end of the deal. Chris, can anyone argue that Von Miller is now worth the money we're paying?
No.
So you hit the ejector button and you go out and you find another defensive end. But the reality is you open cap space, you open a roster hole. So maybe he sticks around, or maybe he's the guy they approach with another like Richie Incognito-esque kind of demand where they go, look, take a pay cut. Take a pay cut, or else you can just be cut. We don't want to put you on the street. We want you to be here, and we want you to be the guy on a team who goes to and wins 3 Super Bowls. But you got to work with us to open up the cap space in order to do that. You want to set NFL history and be the first player to win a Super Bowl with 3 different teams? It's going to cost you $4 million of this year's cap space back. I mean, this is what, but Brandon Beane has left himself the options to do these things. And so when every fan out there is pounding the table, go, 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 you have to understand that Brandon Beane's mind is always going to be wired to, I never want to have to strip the whole roster down and then burn a year of Josh's career. Because that doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve Josh, and Josh deserves better than that. People keep asking, why would the snarkiest parts of our fan base keep asking, why would Josh stick around? He should go to a winning franchise or a place that can go. He stays because he knows that his GM's attitude is, I want to maximize your whole career. I will always work, no matter what goes on, to put the best around you that I can give you. That's why he stays. I mean, it could be because he loves the city of Buffalo, although as a California boy, Chris, do you believe that?
No. As
a guy who's dating a movie star, going to get married to a movie star, do you believe that? Nah.
No.
What I think it is that he has a coach and a GM after being a guy who nobody liked, nobody wanted. Josh Allen was unwanted going into college. He now has a GM and coach who wanted him, who aggressively pursued him and have done nothing throughout the course of their careers but give him the tools or give him the things that they think he needs. It is interesting to me, though, because here's Sean McDermott's comments on the talent level of this team. I have it in a quote. The AFC is just loaded with really good quarterbacks, really good coaches. So the short answer is they're hard to find, like Brandon Beane said. You do need difference makers, though. In my experience, you need 2 to 3 difference makers on each side of the ball that really change the course of a game. I'm not suggesting we have them or don't have them. I'm just saying what gets a team to the Super Bowl philosophically for me, when you look at it and study it, you've got about 2 to 3 on each side of the ball that are top 1 to 3, 1 to 5 at their position, and that's real. That's a Sean McDermott quote from this presser that I didn't make Chris clip. Now, here's a question, Chris. How hard do you think they're fighting over there at One Bills Drive about Brandon Beane's pragmatic approach? Right? Like this idea that it's okay. We'll just take things as they come to us and we'll keep running it back. And here's Sean McDermott feeling comfortable enough to say in a public forum, no. I need 2 to 3 of the best in the NFL on each side of the ball in order to go win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. We, we're doing a live, if you're hearing this, we've already done a live show, and apparently the trade market's heating up for certain guys like a Max Crosby or a Myles Garrett or whoever we can get via trade.
Now, because I'm a sicko, I went back and found Brandon Beane's press conference from January 2020. It came after our loss to the Houston Texans in the wild card round, which was a disaster of a football game. Chris, Doug has been here in studio.
Yes.
His father, a retired police lieutenant, was in my home for that game. Frank, if he was any younger, he would have pistol whipped me in the middle of that thing. And he would have been justified because I was out of control. In that 2020 presser, Beane was asked about the talent level of the team, and Vic Carucci of the Buffalo News, who I have a really funny story about that we'll maybe talk about on the live show tonight, Chris, about whether or not he thought wide receiver was a critical need. Like, seeing what you saw, the lack of production, is this a critical need for the Buffalo Bills this offseason?
It's one of the many positions that I think we need to try and get better. I don't think we're not going to go in and just throw a bunch of money and throw everything and at receivers or anything like that. But we're going to try and find. Well, obviously, the first place we'll be looking is we'll be going to these all-star games and seeing what's there. And free agency's first on the calendar. So we'll take a look. We're already looking at that, but sometimes guys re-sign or get franchised, things like that.
Brandon Beane, 5 years ago, 2020 postseason press conference, BuffaloBills.com.
69 days after he said that, They traded a first rounder and a package of day 3 picks to Minnesota for Stephon Diggs. I still remember where I was. I was on the toilet. And when I got the alert and I started digging into the articles, I sat on the toilet for so long my legs went numb. Like, have you ever done that, Chris?
Yes.
So then I had no choice but to wipe my ass and then crawl out into the hallway like a baby deer, because I couldn't walk. I was walking like a baby, like a newborn baby deer, and I ended up just falling down in the hallway and laying, and my wife looking at me going, "What the hell are you doing?" And I'm laying in the hallway on my phone. I go, "Honey, important football things are happening. Leave me alone. My legs are numb." She goes, "What? None of this makes any sense." I think what I yelled at her actually was like "Stephon Diggs, my legs are numb. Can't talk." And this woman is married to me. Now, I love and hate Brandon Beane because he carries the same tone about him, whether things are good, whether things are bad, whether he's going big game hunting or whether he's like, "Guys, we got to go bargain shop." I don't know. You have to take so much of what Brandon Beane says at face value and yet simultaneously with a grain of salt, because it could change like that. He could go, "Oh, wait a minute, there's an opportunity to go get a star." Ooh, okay. And I think part of it is he's learned that tipping his hand can get him beat. You know, like the whole Trent McDuffie, Kyrie Elam situation. For those of you who don't know, Trent McDuffie was the guy for the Bills. The Chiefs knew that. They found out that the Bills were trying to trade up specifically for him, and they found a way to leapfrog us. And that's the reason that we're playing with Kyrie Elam on the roster right now. And then I think to myself, what about McDermott's pretty transparent view of the talent level on the team? That's out of character, right? For a coach who doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
He goes, "Hey, look, you have to have these." I'm not saying we do or don't, but there's a reason we're not in the Super Bowl. Ask yourselves, Chris, we have ourlads.com for the Bills pulled up. Do the Bills have 2 to 3 players on each side of the ball who you'd say were top 5 at their position? I mean, on offense, I'd say yes. Deion Dawkins, James Cook, Josh Allen.
Agreed.
Honorable mention, Mac Hollins, because he's one of the biggest pains in the ass to play against. If there's anybody who you could do, like if you had a position that was just, hey, dirtbag extraordinaire, Mac Hollins.
Yes.
I tell you all the time, I love dirtbag football. Mac Hollins plays it, and I love it. How about on defense? Take a look at that. What do we got over here, Chris? Take a look on defense and try to find me 2 to 3 top 5 players in the NFL.
I would probably go with Benford,
maybe
Teron Johnson, and maybe Bernard. But Benford and Johnson are both cornerbacks, but different tasks at hand, as Benford's outside and Teron is a slot guy. But I did not go with anybody along the defensive line, which
not at all.
Is a huge need, I think, to get to the Super Bowl.
Matt Milano was an elite player, but time and injury has robbed him of the things that have just maybe rust have robbed him of what made him special. I mean, Chris, we can all sit here and talk about Matt Milano. Hey, he's still got upshot. Of course he does. Also, we can't sit here and pretend like the coaching staff didn't have to go into a press conference and Sean McDermott didn't have to talk about how the last 3 games of the season were going to kind of be a proving ground between Matt Milano and Dorian Williams to see who started in the playoffs. That's a real thing that happened. You don't get called top 5 at your position in the NFL if Dorian Williams can steal your job. Bernard is a rising talent, but top 5? No. NFL linebacking talent is just too good, and he's not there yet. Christian Benford, an ascending talent. All the metrics skew his way, but would I ever call him a lockdown corner like a Revis or Ramsey in his prime?
He doesn't have his own island.
No. Oliver, too streaky. Vaughn, too old. Rousseau, solid but not explosive. It's not just there on that side of the ball. I mean, Chris Joneses don't grow on trees, as Brandon Beane pointed out in his press conference. And it took him 3 years to blossom into a real NFL like star. They probably, Chris, aren't looking at that type of window to go find an impact player to help him win a Super Bowl, right?
No, I think defensive line you can only get via 2 ways. The way we got Von Miller, or you're drafting in the top 5. Those are only the 2 ways to get those types of players on the defensive line.
And this is what I love about Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. It's what makes them so good together, is that generally speaking, they're on the same page with things. You rarely see friction. You don't see discord. You don't see chaos. And most of that's because they do a really great job, Chris, of just staying on the same page, communicating, and then talking to the public.
We should take notes on that.
I know.
For this show.
But we don't. I think that's actually part of our magic, is that we quietly have like husband and wife fights.
Yes.
Back here in the studio while we're trying to record. So the fact that McDermott is very comfortable stating, I'm not going to say we don't have the talent level, but I expect that we have multiple star players on each side of the ball. And I don't think Chris, as a defensive coordinator, you can almost read between the lines on what he's saying here. He's like, look, I don't think I have enough star power on defense to win a Super Bowl. I just don't think I have it. And I don't think that for as nonchalant as Brandon Beane is being, like, I think it's already been communicated. That's why they're talking the way they're talking. Beane is being kind of cagey. McDermott's going, hey, I need guys. I need top 5 guys on both sides of the ball, and I need a couple of them. And we just did the exercise. You go ahead and you look at the roster. Go find one for me. Now, maybe Dwayne Carter becomes something. Maybe Javon Solomon is this ascendant. He's probably going to get an opportunity because I don't see us keeping a Dwayne Smoot. Maybe, but maybe Javon Solomon showed them enough that he can take that swing rotational defensive end job and doesn't cost him a lot of money. It's just this idea that there is no immediate help or growth or rookie who's just going to ascend on the defensive side of the ball. Even if Cole Bishop did take that step, does he play in the trenches, Chris?
He doesn't.
Well, then it almost doesn't matter. Then it almost doesn't matter. You can't single-handedly change a game just by being there. I feel like the Bears ran into that in their Super Bowl with Brian Urlacher. They went and they had Brian Urlacher, and he's great. And he ran around like a chicken with his head cut off. And the Colts ran the ball down their throat despite Brian Urlacher. Why? Because you need a D-line. And that D-line has to execute.
You can go back to like 10 years in the AFC East because there was a point in time where us, the Jets, and the Dolphins were all trying to develop defensive lines so we could beat Brady. I mean, Mario Williams came here, and then he signed with Miami. All of the who's the guy, lineman from USC that the Jets drafted? I can't think of his Williams. I can't think of his first name. But we went through this in the AFC East where we're trying to build offensive lines so we can attack Brady.
Or defensive lines.
Yeah, defensive line. Sorry.
I think that we should trust that Brandon understands what the needs of this team are and how to address them. And if he doesn't go about it in the way that you want, that there's at least a methodology to it, and it's probably still going to be okay. I mean, let's look at this. He wasn't happy to sit on Brown and Beasley as wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 in 2019. He said, okay, I saw what that was. They're good bit players. They're not alphas. Let me go get one. And I hate that phrase. But let me go get a star. And it was transformative. Didn't bring in right tackle competition, as we joked about earlier, for Spencer Brown after a poor second season. Win. Told us, we clipped the audio of him saying that we didn't need to bring in outside linebacker help, and we made fun of Brandon Beane here on this podcast. They were like, oh, the Tremaine Edmonds is going to go. Tremaine Edmonds doesn't get talked about anymore outside of Chicago, does he?
No, I haven't heard his name in the national media.
Nope, because he's a non-factor. We let him go. Trusted the linebacker talent we had on hand. It's clear that Brandon Beane will never really tell you what he has planned. But also when you hear him say things like, we're probably not going to do anything crazy, it's coming from a guy who knows that he's got mechanisms at his disposal to make things not crazy, to open up actionable cap space and go, well, it fit. It wasn't crazy. Why? Because I all of a sudden found us, the cap went up 30 million. I found us 20 million, and all of a sudden we can fit a $24 million a year pass rusher. You're welcome. Kiss my ass. That's who Brandon Beane is. I think he's going to be at least in those conversations, and I like the fact that our GM is capable of that. Now, whether he follows my advice from last week and embraces inner Les Snead, I don't know. But I do know that they need talent, and they all seem to be in lockstep that they have to go out and find it. Right, Chris?
Yep.
Okay. So, difference-making players is what we're talking about. That seems to be a dynamic they're hunting for. And yet, we have this everybody eats mentality that we adopted this season. Sean McDermott, in his press conference, was asked about it and whether it was going to be a part of the team's ethos moving forward, and this is what he had to say.
I think number ones are great. They're hard to find. Let's just say difference-making players overall. But you also have to have a certain element of team, right, in those players, right? So, and they're out there. I mean, difference makers are out there. You just got to find them. And but that blend of difference maker, super talented, top 1 to 5 in the position, but also have the makeup, at least a certain level of the makeup of, hey, you know what? This is about the team. That's critical, and that blend is critical.
There you go, Sean McDermott, end of season press conference. Go get it, BuffaloBills.com.
You hear that, and it sounds like a direct shot at Stephon Diggs, doesn't it?
Yes.
But maybe it's not a shot. It's just a man talking about his experience with a guy who said, look, I know what it is to have one of these uber-talented wide receivers right here in my building. And I know the struggle that comes with it when they don't have a team-first mentality. Look, we are a team that believes in team. You see it in Deion Dawkins. You see it in Josh Allen, the way that they approach the media. You see it in, Chris, how many players here how many players would you say on the Bills this season aren't team-first guys?
Not a lot.
Guys.
We traded them.
We got rid of most of them. And there's a reason for that. And then we go on and we go to the AFC Championship game. Even though we're under-talented, we made it to the AFC title game. After the Emmanuel Achos of the world, we're like, this is going to be the worst season you've seen in years. It's crazy to think that there's, you've built an unselfish football team. And now what you're asking Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott to do is go find another guy with an alpha attitude and bring them into the building. And I think that it'll go better the next time around because they've already dealt with a guy. You handed him this wide receiver who just could have had the world at his fingertips and did, and was an ascending talent, set records, set personal records, was a Pro Bowler, was an All-Pro. Didn't matter. It wasn't enough. It was about him. It was never about the Buffalo Bills. And you can tell that colored a lot of, now I understand. I'm better understanding now watching this Stephon Diggs thing from a distance and seeing how he was with his new team and just seeing how everything's gone on. Stephon Diggs was a me guy. And Sean McDermott is a guy who goes, you have to exist as a team guy. That's why we have Josh. It's why we have Deion. It's why we have Spencer. It's why we have these guys. They will live and die for team rather than, in the words of Kyle Williams, they're playing for the logo on the helmet, not the name on the back. And so it's hard to go find those stars, those alphas that believe the same thing. He's experienced what it is to have to manage those people. And so I understand how this new kind of thing of Chris, what is it like entertaining an egomaniac all the time?
I mean,
dealing with someone who believes they know everything and they know better than you, even though they don't know what you do.
You have to learn to let most things go. Whatever hill that you are going to die on,
yep.
I let you die on that hill, and I'll just let it go.
And this is, guys, this is human interaction. And this is the human part of football that Madden can't make for you. And I love that Sean McDermott made that comment because it really does open the door to it. Because for a presser filled with buzzwords, you know, he talked about the idea of, I know we need this guy, but I need the guy to be a team guy. I need somebody who, and this is the shell shock of having dealt with a Stephon Diggs. They had that experience and they were like, okay, we saw what that is. We don't need that again. And then they went to a title game without one. So now the next guy they bring in who has that talent level also has to be able to be on the level of, I put team before self. And I do like that. I really do. His answer also seems to underscore kind of his iteration of what the wide receiver room should be, right? It's a winning one. Just, I need wide receivers who are unselfish. I need guys who are okay not getting any targets this game. You're going to go out there and you're going to run your routes as hard as you fucking can. We're not going to target you. Why? Because that's not the plan. Deal with it. Go do your job and just deal with what we think is supposed to happen. We're the coaches. I don't know. Now, Chris, do you think that his answer and his kind of almost emphasis on everybody eats is more of an ethos than just a mentality for 1 year? Do you think that would have changed if Joe Brady had left?
It might have, but I don't see in a way that Joe Brady would have left because he was never really considered for anything outside of the Saints, which no one should be considered for that job.
I like that he pulled his name. He pulled his name. He was like, no, I don't want that job. Good Lord. He was like, I was only hoping I would get that so I could leverage somebody else into paying me more. Jesus. No, the everybody eats thing isn't so much an offensive philosophy. It's a team philosophy. And hearing it come from Sean McDermott should kind of show everyone that. It's a, hey, you have to put team before self. And if so, there's not a place for you here. Because they've lived that life. They've walked those shoes and they understand it. I love that coach, GM, in lockstep on these things. The last thing as we close the show. Seems like a weird place to end, but Keon Coleman. Again, both head coach and GM in lockstep. They wished Keon had given him more. Here we are talking about how do you find the top one, you need top offensive production. You need top defensive production. That's how you win a Super Bowl. Beane used the term disappointed about Keon after his injury return. When you're that guy, the GM of a football team, and you say that in a public forum, it carries weight.
Yeah.
So when he questions, like this was a direct quote from Brandon Beane, I don't know his whole story. If he's ever had to try and come back from an injury, like, I don't know his whole thing. It's football! Everyone from Pee Wee to D1 has been hurt, gotten hurt in a football game, and had to come back from it. The fact that Brandon Beane laid it out like, well, I don't know if he's ever been hurt before, so maybe this is new for him. It almost feels like a challenge, right? Like that. Like if I were to go to Chris, be like, I don't know, maybe some people put product in their hair. Like Chris, it's totally cool. Not everyone does this. Maybe this is your first time. Like, I don't know. You immediately know what I'm saying to you, right?
Yeah.
It's a public challenge to a young player who they think has a very high ceiling. And they're basically saying, look, rookie, we're all professionals here. GMs, media players, and coaches, there's no feelings. There's no emotion to the job we do. I'm very happy talking about you in a very surgical manner. We're like, hey, and look at the way he talked about Dalton Kincaid. He's like, we expected a bigger season out of Dalton. We wanted more things, and it didn't pan out. You know, even going so far as to bring up the fact that they're realizing now that he doesn't have the same physical build as Dawson Knox. going, hey, maybe we fucked up by drafting a guy who's built more like a wide receiver than a tight end. I don't know. You're literally issuing public challenges to your players, but not just to the players. If I'm an agent, and this is the reason why if I'm an agent, I love Brandon Beane. Because now I can go and I can take that soundbite and I can play it for my player and go, do you hear what the man who controls your next paycheck is saying? The man who has the authority to ink your next check. Never mind the coaches, never mind the position coaches and all the stuff you might not love, the offensive coordinators. There's a guy who has the ability to decide you're worth another check. And he's telling you X, Y, and Z. You're too soft. You didn't bounce back from injury. This guy, you're not built strong enough. Your lower body strength. We don't love it. We don't love the fact that you're not rocked up. You don't seem like you're spending enough time in the weight room. Go get that money. And by that, I mean get in the gym, go work out, and go produce on the football field. Chris, this is why NFL agents love our guy. Right?
Yeah.
Those are two players who are absolutely going to have to step up and play to their potential if the Buffalo Bills are going to find that top 1 to 5. To be a top 5 tight end isn't hard, is it, Chris? You play fantasy football.
Yeah.
It's not hard to produce at the tight end position.
No. Unless you're Kyle Pitts.
Well, I mean, it is hard, but not when you're as talented as Kincaid could be.
Correct.
Just be available. Be a little bit tougher. Fight through contact. Well, you need better lower body strength to do that. Go work on your craft, kid. Go be a top 5 NFL tight end. There's money out there for you. The team will thrive because of it, but here's your carrot. Go chase it. I love it. And we're going to need them both because they're still relatively cheap on rookie deals to step up and play to their potential if the Bills are going to maintain this championship momentum that they ended 2025 with. I think it's good that the staff knows it and that the players are hearing it because now the ball is in their court. I love getting to do this and getting to excise these interviews and look through everything and kind of celebrate all the great things that are, because Chris, when you end the season the way we did, everything sucks. There's a shroud of gloom over everything. But you can look at your own front office and go, we're not incompetent. We're not lost. In fact, if anything, our guys are doing this the right way. And they finally seem to have found a certain recipe for all of it. I love it. And I can't wait to see what the rest of the offseason has to bring. This is great. I'm hoping that this spurs some of you to get back into the offseason swing. If not, I can't make you. But I'm happy you at least listen to this. For tonight, we got to get the hell out of here, though. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. This has been your Rockpile Report.